327, basis for establishing areas of special flood hazards. 54-329, compliance with article and other regulations, and section 54-338, specific standards. And Mr. Koenig. Oh,
So all of us.
You're the first name on here, so that's where I just called you.
No, good afternoon again, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. So the item in front of you, I'm going to give a high-level briefing, and then floodplain management will tackle it, and then planning and zoning will tackle it. But basically, what you have in front of you is the floodplain ordinance. By direction of FEMA and the state floodplain administrator, we were asked to harden the language that is currently within the ordinance. Initially, there was two items that were up for discussion. There was the floodplain maps, and then there was the ordinance itself. As you've heard today from multiple speakers, there was a request to hold off on the maps. We've actually come to that conclusion from a staff perspective. We've recommended to council that we delay that until January, until Cobb Finley brings those forward. And so I want to make sure that everyone knows, both online and in the audience, that those maps will not be looked at or adopted today. Those maps will be addressed once the decision of the final data is presented to council for their review, and that information is reviewed internally as well by staff. And so just to make that clear, maps are not on the table today. What is on the table is the ordinance language change. And again, there's specific areas. One is to harden, and I'll let Ashley talk to the specifics of this, but it's to harden the language specifically related to the panels for the floodplain ordinance. That was a recommendation directly from FEMA. On the second page, you'll notice related sections of the specific code, just to make sure that people know the reference of what they're actually looking at. It's not necessarily changing anything, it's just showing where information is at so that they can signify how that's important. In section 2, under section 54.338, there is a change, which is a minimum of 2 feet. That minimum of 2 feet obviously won't be applied to anything new until those are approved, but the reference to the 2 feet is specifically oriented to HUD requirements to maintain the federal flood insurance program. If there's any HUD components that are ever built within the village and this requirement is not inside of the floodplain ordinance, we can lose out on federal floodplain insurance for the village. And so that's why this language is being inserted. You'll notice that insert happens again on the third page, right prior to the end of the ordinance. And then towards the end of the ordinance, there's a reference specifically to the specific ordinance in 2014-09, which is when the FEMA floodplain and those maps were adopted as well. And so this is merely a language hardening. The only significant change that references the federal guidelines for federal flood insurance is the request for that increase of 2 feet above the base flood elevation, or BFE, as you'll hear it called multiple times in all the data that's going to be coming forward. But those are the significant changes. And with that, I'll pass it over to Ashley so she can get into more details.
All right. So kind of reiterating what Mike said about those maps. Again, those aren't up for discussion today. We do have currently Cobb Finley out on site as we're speaking. I actually drove by their vehicle this morning, and they were already starting doing their inventory. And so they are collecting a lot of data right now. They're looking at different precipitation models, and they're going to provide you guys with the best data possible. And they're going to do it based off of FEMA map standards. That way this can get approved by FEMA. So they're modeling, they're looking at high water marks, they're looking at the burn scar, they're looking at the whole picture. They're all the watersheds.
Sorry, just one other aside. There was a reference earlier, and I just want to make sure everyone is clear on this, that certain parts of the homes were not necessarily hit by the current floodwaters. Those were the worst floodwaters we've seen since Dolly. Just a reminder that the flood modeling that's being done, the initial debris modeling that was done by the state was at 2 inches. Our boots on the ground and eyes only looked at the high water marks of where they actually hit. the flood waters were created by roughly 1.64 inches of rain in 1 hour. That was the most that we had throughout this area. That's considered a drought during our regular rain season. What our average amount is usually 2 to 4 inches in an hour. And so that's why Cobb Finley is taking that data, reviewing the current flood marks, or the high water marks, and applying that into a modeling area specifically, because that does in fact increase the flooding. So someone that says today, my property isn't necessarily in a floodplain, if we got the regular amount of water that the village sees on an annual basis in the last 10 years, there will be a significant amount of water. So that's what Cobb Finley is looking at. They're modeling, they're verifying, they're justifying all of that information. We're hoping best case scenario comes back and the maps don't significantly change, but there could be some significant changes, not necessarily shortening. That won't happen. If anything, it'll widen. And so we just want to make sure that people are aware of those issues.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Let me let her and then you.
Okay, so let's just, the gentleman that was here, he said his house was on the river, but it was not, the inside was not hurt. So that would go the 50% or less, so they would not have to go above, right?
So according to floodplain standards and in our ordinance, if the property was not 50% damage or otherwise known as substantial damage, they fall into the floodplain map that their house was built into. So this new ordinance, it applies to new construction and properties that have become substantially damaged.
Right.
Or if a property owner decides to do any substantial improvements, that's also 50% of the market value that you improve to your house.
Okay.
Oh, and excuse me, Mayor Pro Tem, could you define for those in Radio Land exactly what you mean by substantial damage? Because it's a broad term and there are a lot of folks listening.
So substantial damage is the damage that has caused by any natural disaster. It doesn't have to just be a flood. It could be fire, it could be earthquakes, tornadoes, anywhere there's a natural disaster. And so what that takes into account is what was the cost for the labor and what was the cost for the materials. You then take this value and you apply it to the market value of that house, not the property, just the house, and just for that structure itself. So like, let's say they have a different structure, a garage, unattached garage, that's completely separate. It's the house itself. If they hit 50% damage, then they would be considered substantially damaged, at which point they will have to follow new ordinance regulations. If,
For any rebuilding
for
or,
rebuilding. If they were at 40% damage, they would be adopted in, they would be grandfathered into their
grandfathered in.
old
But I
map.
think that's an important point because there are a lot of people that have a lot of concern
Yeah,
about the
exactly.
definitions and who's in and who's out.
So, and just to clarify, Councilmember Jackson, there are two methods to determine that amount. You can have a licensed contractor go out and give you a direct quote. That direct quote is then subtracted from the appraised value that the county appraiser has on file. That's one version. Another version is you can get an appraised value of your home by a certified appraiser who would tell you the market value of what that home is and then what the market value of the damage is. And so when you take those two, and they could give you very different numbers, right? They could give you very different numbers, but those are the two allowed methods by federal and state guidelines that allow you to determine that 50% above or 50% below amount that can happen. And so that is significant. It does take into account, if you do the appraised model, it takes into account pre-disaster amounts. So if someone has a commercial building or a home, it may have been valued at $500,000, where the appraisal value that's at the county may be something significantly different. And so numbers will obviously change depending on which method the owner decides to go with, but those are both approved methods that both the state and federal governments approve of in order to get those values of 50% above or below.
Thank you. Councilor Hooker.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. So again, as we're just really The questions we're asking are because they've been asked, and it needs to be answered to anybody that's listening or may want to come back and listen. So we're not approving flood plan right now, not doing any of that. We've actually put it off further to some people's disdain because they're wanting to build right now. But we're waiting and having other entities come in, not just you. It's not the village that's going out and saying this is where it is. That's the first thing. Second thing, if we were to do that, if we were to go out there and go, you know what? Ashley, you go out there and you make that new floodplain 5 feet either direction of the center line, and that's it. Everybody else can build wherever they want to. Let's go, vote early, vote often. Then if a disaster happens and it gets washed away, FEMA could come in and go, we're not going to give you any assistance. And the furtherance of that is, we're not going to give you any federal money for any road projects, any grants, anything that comes down. Village of Rio Doce is on the blacklist because you did not follow what we have set to be the standard.
Exactly.
That is correct. And just to clarify the first part of your statement, Councilmember Hooker, so if a person today is in the floodplain or the proposed floodplain, and they get their information and it says that they are 50% under the actual amount that they have, we can in fact hand them a building permit today. So we are strongly recommending to residents that they either get a contractor, licensed contractor, and/or a certified appraiser to go out and get that certified appraisal value and/or the estimated amount of what that cost is to build their building, and this is the key word, back to an existing level. They can't make advancements, they can't make changes, they can't make enhancements. As long as it's back to that existing level, back to where it was, then we can take that. If it's under 50%, they can walk into community development today, submit that letter that documents what the change is and that it's under 50%, and walk away with the building permit. Well, go through that process, but they can start the building process and the building permit process today. If they are over that amount, that's where we cannot award a building permit to move forward, because they would then have to follow whatever the new requirements are, which transitions to your second point, that if we just decided to let them start today and something did happen, there would be significant issues that the village and the owner of that property would end up facing in the future.
Thank you.
Councilor Corey?
Couple of questions, Mike. First of all, as it pertains to this proposed ordinance, can you underscore again that the 2 feet rule, that's being handed down from HUD?
Yes, and Ashley can get into the details, but high level, what HUD basically stipulates is that you must have 2 feet above the base flood elevation in order to qualify for federal flood insurance. Whatever that base flood elevation may be is adopted.
And I'm trying to differentiate between what we as a village are deciding versus what the federal government is mandating.
Yes, sir.
The second question goes back to this 50% rule. Whose rule is that?
That is FEMA's rule.
Okay. And so if we don't uphold that, what happens?
What was just discussed of losing federal funding.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Possibly paying it back.
And the village could possibly be liable for the damages to that property because we didn't do our due diligence.
All right.
My question, the high water mark or the 2 feet, so there's no construction on waterway, because I remember those two terms,
Yes,
waterway and
there's
floodplain,
there's no construction within the floodway
floodway.
as long as, if they are above 50%. Now, if they were built way back when, before that floodway was put in, and they got very minimal damage, they're still good to go.
Okay,
If they hit that 50% though, and they are in that floodway, there's no building back.
They have to remove their property.
Ashley, can you define floodway and flood
So
zone?
a floodway is ultimately, a good way to think about it is the river. Now, it does go beyond the boundaries of the river a little bit, but floodway allows out water. There's no obstacles in its course. It's gonna go that direction regardless. Your floodplain allows the water to spread out, to kind of help slow down that water.
And those definitions are decided by whom?
FEMA.
And Mayor Pro Tem Salas and council, just as a quick reference to this ordinance, there's a question as to NRCS, there's a question to all of these projects that are starting to occur throughout the village. And actually, the reason I was late to this meeting is because I was on our flood debris call, which meets once a week, and it includes federal, state, and local stakeholders. And so everyone is contributing on a weekly basis. This is the process we're working through. We were actually on a call earlier with USACE on river diversion and what that looks like. And so from talking to Army Corps, to the state, to NRCS, our local flood diversion components, we all are coordinating equally. While we don't necessarily know the impact of what's happening on the reservation, there are discussions at that high level of things are happening. There is diversionary tactics that are happening, and our flood management engineers, as they're doing the evaluation of the watershed, will be able to evaluate several of those impacts and apply them to the current model so that we can see those things. I know there was some concern about possibly not coordinating or not understanding what other entities are doing. And so that's actually something that is happening on a daily basis, but we meet weekly to make sure everyone's updated. But that coordination is happening at the federal, state, and local level as well.
Any other questions for staff?
I've got one question. Just as far as in here on the manufactured homes, when you're building in the floodplain, that it states that the first floor shall be 2 foot above the watermark. From my mind, typically, unless they've changed, a lot of your manufactured homes, when they're put in, are set up 2, 3, 4 feet off of the ground. So that allows everything that's going to be, that it's actually the integrity of the structure, or whatever that it's sitting on top of, is going to be underwater. So does that mean the first floor of the manufactured home after it's installed, regardless of what's underneath or how high it's built?
Yes, sir, that is accurate. And so one of the things and one of the reasons why you see most of those homes on blocks that high in the first place is that they're already meeting that 2 feet regulation. So what now happens is most of the time you haven't seen the impact of the floodplain in the areas that we currently live in. And the reason that has been is because the maps that were originally drawn didn't obviously have the impact or the same impacts of the burn scar. And so we didn't see the same type of flooding. Now that that flooding is changing significantly over a long period of time, those possibilities of adding that additional 2 feet, whatever the new floodplain are, what the new floodplain is, or those new high water marks are, that's where you'll see the increase. So the major concern, to be completely transparent, is you may have a home that is built currently 2 feet above what wasn't an existing high water mark because there wasn't anything. Now, if that high water mark is 2, 4, or 8 feet, worst case scenario, you could be building 2, 4, or 10 feet into the air before you put your house down. And so obviously that's a huge concern for residents. That's a huge concern for the council and elected, and as we move forward, staff. How do we start tackling those items? What does that look like? And so that's why we are taking a very cautious approach. It is quick because we won't see the FEMA guidelines possibly for another 3 to 5 years. That's why we are moving to do the studies that we're doing, to work with the state and their studies, and to have the boots on the ground with our floodplain manager and our director of public works in the area to quickly identify that information. Without it, we can see some negative impacts come once snow melts and come spring. So we want to make sure we get those things put into ordinance as quickly as possible.
So just a quick question, does anybody that's with the firm Cobb family, are they familiar with the FEMA structure, their guidelines?
They are familiar.
What they would probably propose in the end?
They're very familiar with it. They've actually, they do a lot of floodplain throughout different entities, so it's not just us. They've done Lomars, Lomar Fs, like they've done the process with FEMA. They know what FEMA expects of them. And, we actually are working closely with Trey, and so that way if Cobb Finley has any questions, we can, get Trey involved as well.
Trey is the regional floodplain manager for FEMA Region 6.
So with that, does FEMA like give an accreditation to any firm that they're?
No, they just make sure you're following their standards. So they have a list of standards, when it comes to the data that's collected. Did it meet XY requirements? Did you properly fill out the forms? Did you collect the right imagery? So there's a lot of data that goes into it that FEMA does require for it to get approved through them.
Any other questions? This being a public hearing, at this time, I'm gonna open it up to the public for any input, for this ordinance change. Anybody on Radio Land? Nobody? Hands up or anything there? Okay, none.
Oh, nope.
Wait a
Oh.
minute.
Mary's coming. State your name, just your
Date of
full
birth.
name.
My social security number. And I voted. Thank you, I'm Mary Austin. I have a property, 165 Fern Trail. And I know we're not discussing the flood maps, that was made perfectly clear, and we did garner a lot of information. I know FEMA weighs in on these decisions. The thing that bothers me is the order in which things are being done, because you're voting on changing an ordinance, but you don't know how that ordinance is going to affect the public until you get the maps. It's kind of like the chicken and the egg. Which comes first? My logical thinking is to get the full picture of what you're about to do to make the adoption, you ought to be able to look at the final maps to know what's going to happen. And I know that there's people out there, there's a lot of different scenarios, and I kind of hear all of that, and I see all of those sides. But I think what's gotten me most, and then what I've heard from neighbors that live out of town, is they're hearing things through the public forums, such as the group that was meeting, the kind of planning initiative to go to the legislature on what they wanted to do and what they wanted to ask for. And what I read was, I'm not on Facebook, but I can get on there and read it every once in a while and know why I'm not on Facebook. But there was a statement that was made about how excited this group was to set forth an initiative about planning a brand-new park and green space. Yeah, well, it was on Facebook too. But I think the thing that bothered me is, it's not like that's raw land. It's not the soccer field. It's not unoccupied property. Other people own that property. And I think it bothered me because I felt like, I don't know how it will affect me as a property owner, but it bothered me that other people were making these decisions and moving this stuff forward, but the people that it was going to affect were never even brought to the table. And if that was you, how would you feel? So it's kind of like, I started to think of an analogy, and I thought, say you've got cancer, and your doctor, instead of telling you you've got cancer, is telling your neighbor across the street, hey, do you know your neighbor's got cancer? You might want to pack up some meals and help them out while they're going through chemotherapy. It's kind of the same thing. No one ever told the patient. No one ever told the people. And I'm more of an embracer of transparency and working together. And it almost seems off-putting. And I think that breeds resistance because it feels non-transparent. And I just hope, I also did a lot of research, and I know that FEMA is the driving force. They have a way to twist the arms of municipalities by saying you're not going to get this funding, you're not going to get that. They scare you to death with good reason. We're going to hold back funding because their long-term interests are served by getting rid of all these properties in the floodplain. They're looking at flood insurance claims 10, 20 years down. The more they can mitigate, the more they can push this agenda, the better off it is for them. and the way they get the local municipalities to work. Henceforth, I read an article about someplace in South Dakota that flooded, like in 1972. And what they did was they worked through the municipalities to get ordinances set prior to the flood maps being drawn, and they put in an ordinance that you could own your property, but you couldn't spend the night there. Well, what good is your house if you can't sleep in it? So thereby, the next step was, well, they bought the houses or they moved the houses depending on what the owners, and I don't know the long story, how much those people were compensated for their land. But it just showed the behavior of setting ordinances that have impacts later on, and you don't know what. It's like an unintended consequence, and do you weigh the benefit and the risk? You do that in medicine, we do it in everything. So my only plea is that there be more transparency, there be more consideration, and it seems to be really hyper-focused on that area down on Fern Trail, because I know Midtown would like to have another park. I know everybody would like to have this green space, but my feeling is if you're not going to do it to everybody that's involved in this situation. But I think I had some notes, and I apologize because I'm being long-winded, but I knew that the 50% thing kind of, in my mind, it was clear to listen to it. You can put it back as it was built. And I know people that say, oh, I have less than 50% damage, but they can't elevate and they can't mitigate to prevent future losses. So who in their right mind is going to put that money back into their house? They know that. That's why they set these rules. And it's a waiting game. They have time. They wait until it's either a blight or people I'm hearing through the grapevine about people that have mortgages that are walking away. And is that what we want? 5 years of blight until people finally cave in and walk away, and then the rest of the people that aren't damaged have to look at the blight and live around the blight. So I think there's just a lot more we have to consider before you make these moves. And I just appreciate all of you, because I know you listen to us when we call. It's a small town. And I appreciate your time and consideration, but I'm more of a more information before you pull the trigger on something kind of gal.
Mayor,
So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary. Yes.
question for Ron and Mike. In response to Mrs. Austin's comments about the green space, I too have heard about this, but as far as I'm aware, as a municipality, we have not done anything.
And
related
Mayor
to
Pro Tem
green space.
Salas and Councilmember Corey. So, one, I appreciate Ms. Austin's comments, and we definitely, as a staff perspective, want to be as transparent as possible. And from the newspaper article or from the information, I'm not sure if there was a disconnect on information, but what I can say and what the topic I can talk to is there have definitely been questions about what happens within the floodway. We've attended Thursday morning meetings. There's a group that has been kind of brought together to have high-level discussions related to several different items. It's basically a economic forum for local, state, and federal officials, and it's a working group as well. Some of the discussions that have occurred there are what happens to people in the floodway, how can we assist, what can be done. What I can say is that there's been very high-level discussions as what programs are available. There's been an NRCS program that has been brought up. NRCS did present to that group to say, this is a possibility. You might actually see that out on Facebook later this week through the county. They're the ones that are looking at that kind of option. But it's as a possibility on how to assist homeowners. It is definitely a program that is a volunteer program. So it's not a program that forces people into anything else. The second option is a possibility, and we've been very transparent, or at least we're trying to communicate this to the public, that there could be a program in the next 2 to 5 years that FEMA brings in. There is a purchasing program that they do. They only do it once they see the impact to the areas. As Ms. Austin mentioned, it's kind of a waiting game. And so where you see that impact to homes. They may have flooded 2 or 3 times, one may have been missed, another may have been missed. It is a 75% program, meaning that 75% of the monies are fronted by FEMA, 25% is usually picked up by the local municipality or the county government, or split. Usually that happens, and most of those programs focus on the disaster value, not a pre-disaster value from an appraisal standpoint. The third discussion that's been high level, village staff as well as county staff have been strongly advocating, just like SB1 that allowed the 44 million for infrastructure dollars. There's been a question and a discussion to request possible monies for the state or the local government or the county government to be able to receive funds that would allow the municipality or the county to try and buy out areas within the floodplain. Again, that's high level. None of those programs are coming to.
Well, besides being high level, it's conceptual.
Yes, all conceptual as to possibilities, and this is only possibilities that could assist residents. And the reason they're doing that is to try and figure out what options actually exist that can be brought back to discuss with the public, to say, these are options that could be a possibility, and then possibly selecting one of those options and saying, what direction would residents want to go if they had a choice? But until we can actually identify what options would even be available, most of those have been discussed as options and possibilities, but not necessarily this is going to be the direct case. I think the reference to green space or parkways has always been made as a reference to examples of what happens to floodways. Most of those cases are made references to things that, for example, the Trinity River Parkway in Dallas, for example. That was a floodway that was transformed into a recreational area, but it's a hardened floodway that protects communities downriver. There's other areas in Colorado that have done similar things, turned them into green spaces, but those were merely discussed as examples of what have happened in other communities, not necessarily that's what we want to do within the village and or the county. So just to clarify that information, those are the items that we've discussed.
Again, I'm underscoring, we have taken no action.
No, sir.
Related to this. And then a second question for either Ron or you, Mike. Mary brings up a valid point. Should we wait for the maps before we adopt the ordinance? What's the urgency with the ordinance?
So I'll pass it over to Ashley in a minute, but the discussion that we had with FEMA and the state flood plain manager was that if these items aren't added immediately, and there is post-flooding that happens either due to melting and or flooding from another instance, they will not support us at all in flood insurance. And so that is the main reason we are bringing this to the council immediately, to make sure that any individuals that were impacted in the previous disaster will in fact be covered in the next cascading event. So if a person is currently in the floodway or floodplain and they do have flood insurance, and we pass this language, FEMA will support us 100% in making sure those individuals are covered in the next event. If we do not pass this language and harden what our ordinance is moving forward, they will not support us. And so Ashley can.
But have we talked to FEMA and said, look, guys, we've
We have.
hired a company.
Yes.
This is imminent.
So I just want to go over what's actually being proposed in the ordinance. So the building and the floodway, the floodplain, that's already been adopted. So I want to go over what's actually being proposed to you guys in this ordinance to help harden the language here. The first one is under section 54-327, and all it's doing is stating the firm panels that the village did adopt back in November 5th of 2014. And it has the panel numbers. That's all that is. That's nothing else added to that one.
And so no change.
It's just added in additional language. It just lists the actual firm panels that the Village of Ruidoso is under.
So where before it just said firm panels, this actually identifies each firm panel, just to clarify what those firm panels are.
And what is that? What is a firm?
It's your flood insurance rate map.
Okay.
That's what insurance companies use to determine your rate.
Is this the 2019 map?
No, this was in 2014. That was the last
Okay,
time
so
this was
we're
updated.
not altering the maps at all.
Nope.
Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
No, go
Mayor
ahead.
Pro Tem Salas, Councilor Corey, on their first question, even when the cabinet and the community was here with the governor, that was also expressed regarding the green space and other ideas. But again, the village was not, we're not even looking at that at this point. Maybe in the future, if there's some programs that, some of those areas that may be able to do a buyout or whatnot, village, if the county is the sponsor on that through, say, NRCS, at that time, the village may be interested in being able to acquire the property through the NRCS buyback program within the village of Ruidoso. Going back into about on the ordinance itself, working with the state floodplain manager, who has been great. He's great to work with, Heath. He has provided that in detail, all the information that we bring today to the council.
Thank you, Ron.
So for section 54-329, all it's stating is all appropriate state and federal permits have been attained before the issuance of approved permit by the Village of Ruidoso. That's part of the Clean Water Act. It's something that Army Corps and potentially NMED, Surface Water Quality Bureau, would require if you entered into the ordinary high water mark. That's all that is saying. Now for the standards, it says a minimum of 2 feet. Not only is this this is a HUD requirement that's coming down that the village is going to have to adopt. If we don't adopt it today, we're going to have to adopt it here within the next couple of months. That is a requirement for HUD. They passed this language in April. They sent out a newsletter concerning this.
So Ashley, listening to what you're saying, it sounds like all of this is basically to clean up the ordinance pre-flood, arguably.
Yes, that's.
Because the flood situation doesn't bear into any of these changes.
No, the flood situation does not go into any of what we are recommending. Sometimes you'll hear the base 2 feet above base flood elevation. You'll also hear it as freeboard, 2 feet freeboard. So you'll hear those terms interchangeably. And so all we're doing is we're hardening our language. This is coming down. This is from either HUD or from FEMA or from the state, just saying, hey, this is already a requirement. We already know you're following it. Let's just make sure it's in here. That way,
We're following it, but it's not in our
yeah,
ordinance.
so make sure you're getting the appropriate state and federal permits. Make sure you're doing your freeboard requirement.
No, and I just want to clarify one other last item. So the actual, a minimum of 2 feet is currently in the ordinance. The change to a minimum of 2 feet removes to or, and that's the change that Ashley just made reference to. So when we say we're changing the ordinance to harden it, it's basically taking out the weaker portion of and or the two. It's establishing that truly is the minimum. So we are following this already. It's just enforcing the new changes that have come out in April. As Councilmember Corey made point to, that yes, it's cleaning up what the actual ordinance says to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Right.
And Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I took to heart Mary Austin's comments. To give it another slant, I mean, if you looked at it medically, the one with the hammer in all hospitals is Joint Commission. It's a federal agency. If you don't meet their requirements and you don't follow them, or you don't change your rules and regs to be in alignment with theirs, then you're cited. And if it's severe enough, you no longer can have Medicare or Medicaid patients in your hospital. And considering that that's over 60% of those that are in our hospital, that could be a financial disaster. And what I read in this, as I read through it twice, it looked to me like what we were trying to do is just bring us into a regulatory compliance, not recreating or changing or making a new mousetrap, but just bringing us into a clean set of in our ordinance of requirements. And that's the way I'd read it, and I took to heart what Mary said, but this basically seems to be something that we wouldn't, if we did not act, there's a rebound effect that would affect a lot of people whose properties have been impacted. Am I incorrect in that assessment? Because you've gone over this in our EOC meetings as well.
Yes.
And I think that it's pretty well laid out. I mean, whether it's FEMA, or HUD, or a state agency, or many of the alphabet soup agencies that you remarkably keep ahead and abreast of, we're pretty much mandated. I mean, the backwash on it would be devastating, I think, to many landowners and homeowners.
Any other questions?
I got one question there, but it doesn't really have to do with this ordinance. It really has to do with the floodplain and the future, when we look many years into the future, because when the floodplain area is adopted, the new map that is approved by the village and finally approved by FEMA, and then that, of course, becomes, let's just say, permanent. Now, my question is that all of this water is coming down and causing these floods due to the burn scar, and that is what is causing this excess water to just run off. So what happens 25 years from now when you have the vegetation grows back, you have this and that and the other thing, and now the impact of those waters aren't near what they are right now?
So
Then, can you go back and say, look, we're not being affected by this?
we won't be able to go back to prior maps. However, we can make a request to FEMA to come back out, resurvey the area, and create new maps. Once,
Okay,
so
have you ever known of that being done?
there was one municipality that they were getting maps very frequently because they were always changing, that I was reading about. Other municipalities, if they're not changing that much, they kind of get pushed to the wayside. But you can always make a request for you to get added onto their list to come out and resurvey. If not, we can always take the approach that we're doing now and hire a new company or hire in a company, come do FEMA standards and see if FEMA would approve it.
Okay, so once they came in, it might take another 3, 4, 5 years for FEMA to actually approve that map or that recommendations or that finding.
So the nice part about having a contractor come in and do the maps is the work's already been done. So at that point, they'll just do a quick review of it. Then they had to open it up for public comment. I think it's a 90-day.
90-day.
90-day public comment period. And depending on the comments, we'll determine how they will move forward.
And Mayor Pro Tem Salas, Councilor Eby, one of the big issues that's actually facing fire disaster areas today is flooding and burn scar issues. And so there's actually discussions and white papers that are starting to be worked on and drafted directly related to floodplain management within burn scar areas. So I actually think that we could possibly lead the nation in these areas. California has some, but because flooding's always been an issue there, it isn't necessary. It's never been really taken into account. It's not till we've seen these forest fires that have happened in mountainous areas that people are now starting to look back and say, wait a minute, to your point, what if this grows back in 5 to 7 years, then what happens? And so there is a very high-level discussion right now that's happening at the federal level for insurance, for floodplain. Those are all issues that are being discussed as we speak. I don't think you'll see a result of those discussions probably for another 2 to 3 years, which actually could be just right for us because we'll be at the middle, moving on to the tail end of that disaster impact. And so we can possibly, as Ashley mentioned, make a strong request to have those floodplain maps reviewed again. And so I think that you're going to start seeing that nationally in fire devastated areas that have same or similar impacts that we have.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other public input? I'll close the public portion of this hearing, and I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I move to approve ordinance 2024-05, an ordinance modifying Chapter 54 Land Use, Article 4, flood hazard regulations, sections 54-327, basis for establishing areas of special flood hazard, 54-329, compliance with article and other regulations, and section 54-358, specific standards. And I so move.
I'll second. I did want to bring or ask you, Stephanie, this had been approved through P and Z 2 times, I believe, or it's had public hearings. What were the response at those
That
hearings?
is correct. So we held the first one on September 3rd, and then we had to bring in the second part after the FEMA that Ashley was working with noticed that the other parts needed to be strengthened. So the first part of adoption was hearing the 2 additional feet above base flood elevation. At that hearing, we had no input received by the community, either written or in person. The second meeting that incorporated the rest of the changes that were discussed was held on October 1st. We did have a turnout at that one. Support for the ordinance was made, and the majority of the discussion that was handled was more focused on questions of the mapping, how the data is collected, but nothing that was specific to declining the ordinance. And unanimously, the Planning Commission did vote to approve the recommendations.
And that's where I read somewhere that they're recommending to us to approve the ordinance, so. With that said, can we have a roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk?
Mayor,
Oh,
question, any thing by mail to the clerk's office?
she mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem Salas and Councilor Corey. No, I did have one resident who lives out of town reach out to me to provide her with a copy of this proposed ordinance. But as far as any written oppositions or in favor of, no.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Proceed with the roll
Yes.
call vote, please.
Councilor Jackson,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas,
Aye.
Councilor Eby,
Aye.
Councilor Letterman,
Aye.
Councilor Corey,
Aye.
Councilor
Councilor
Hooker.
Hooker.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The motion passed. Thank you all for your hard work and
Yeah, thank you.
getting all this information for us. And what I forgot to mention at the beginning of the meeting, the reason why the mayor's not here, because he's at the annual, is it the annual or winter City of Leagues Conference? I won't say where, but that's why he's missing out today, and I'm filling in for him. What I really appreciate that him being there is that now they'll have discussion about forest health and thinning, especially since New England is burning up now. That's what I foresee. And now some of those legislatures may start listening to what we've been saying for the last 50 years here in the Southwest. So hopefully, we'll make ground on that approach, so.
Well, who wants Golden Pond anyway?
Okay, moving on to regular items. Item number 1, we've already addressed. And thank you, Chief Minner, for accepting. I didn't even ask you, will you accept the job? There you go there, so.
Too late now.
Sucker.
He gave a speech.
So, regular item number 2, discussion of possible action on state grant in-aid agreement to public libraries for fiscal year 2025 between the New Mexico State Library and the Village of Ruidoso Public Library in the amount of $10,287.08. And
Thank
we
you.
have Denise. Thank
Mayor
you.
Pro Tem and Council, this is our annual state grants and aid agreement. We get the money by filling out the annual report, as well as ensuring that they have our data and know that what we're doing. And they have a formula that they use that has to do with your population. And to my knowledge, they go off the population of the last census. So for 10 years, you'll basically be getting the same amount of money.
Do they take in account that we serve county residents and Ruidoso Downs residents, or is it just strictly Ruidoso
It is
residents?
strictly a Village of Ruidoso. We are the Village of Ruidoso Library, although we offer services to the county
Yes.
because the smaller libraries that exist, we do not get monies from that. We do, however, get money from the county
Yes,
to help support us in doing what we do for the county.
okay. That's good. You do a great job over
Yeah,
there.
you do.
Thank you.
I get a lot of compliments. Any other questions for Denise?
Mayor, I move approval of the state grants and aid agreement to public libraries for fiscal year 2025 between the New Mexico State Library and the Village of Ruidoso Public Library in the amount of $10,287.08.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Counselor Corey?
Aye.
Counselor Jackson?
Aye.
Counselor Hooker?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas?
Aye.
Counselor Letterman?
Aye.
Counselor Eby?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a
Thank you,
lot.
Denise.
Item number 3, discussion and possible action on agreement with Cutler Repaving, Inc. through the New Mexico statewide pricing agreement number 90-805-19-16759 for pavement resurfacing on White Mountain Drive, Poor Drive, LL Davis Drive, Jack Little Drive, Leon Ferraro Drive, and Wingfield Street in the amount of $1,776,453.68, including New Mexico gross receipt tax. All right, Adam.
Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, this is the agreement with Cutlery Paving. The funds are coming from a TPF grant that we've received. And like it says, it'll be to resurface the roads in question.
And Mayor Pro Tem Salas, members of the council, we do have some contingency funds in there. The grant was for $2 million, so we'll utilize the contingency funds for additional patching or whatnot prior to laying the resurfacing of the roadways, so.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
question for Adam. Just curious, how do we decide which streets get priority?
So, well, Mayor Pro Tem, Councilor Corey, so with these funds, it's got to be artery to artery or bus routes.
Okay.
So that those, the roads in question, sorry. The roads in question, like I said, it's got to be a bus route or main traveled roads. So assessing those roads or, the ones that we can't get to or we don't have funds for, we can assess those as bus routes.
Thank you.
And Mayor Pro Tem Salas, Councilor Corey, last year, some of these same roadways, we submitted 2 projects for $2 million each this year. Some of them, last year, we did not receive any TPF funds, so we just, with some of the same roadways that already were identified, and then we just resubmitted, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Adam? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve agreement with Cutler Repaving, Inc. through the New Mexico statewide pricing agreement, number 90-805-19-16759, for pavement resurfacing on White Mountain Drive, Poor Drive, LL Davis Drive, Jack Little Drive, all these people, Leon Farrar Drive, and Wingfield Street, in the amount of $1,776,453.68, including New Mexico GRT.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Counselor Jackson?
Aye.
Counselor Eby?
Aye.
Counselor Corey?
Aye.
Counselor Hooker?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas?
Aye.
Counselor Letterman?
Aye.
Moving on, item number 4, discussion and possible action on task order RFP 2024-003P BH-03 for US 70 New Mexico 48 intersection design with Bohannon Huston, Inc. for a total project cost of $1,699,976.05, including New Mexico gross receipt tax.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas, members of the council, this is the second part of the EDA grant that we received. The first grant we awarded to Stantec engineering firm, that was for the Upper Sudworth project. This here is for the US 70, New Mexico 48 intersection at the Y. This will be for the full design of that, not only the intersection, but also the corridor up to Mescalero Trail. That'll be part of this project. We're working with the Department of Transportation in order to complete this project. It is a state infrastructure, it's not village infrastructure, but we're hoping to have this project for the construction phase of it placed as a priority for the Department of Transportation. At that time, we would finalize environmental clearances, also any type of landscaping in that area, that we would work with the Department of Transportation to include it in the project to do some more beautification. One item that's going to be critical on this project, and Ashley's been helping with Cobb Finley, is drainage in that area due to the flooding that we had this last year. They're going to also have to include that in this design is the drainage part of it. And I'll stand for any questions on this.
This amount is for the total project.
This is Mayor Pro Tem Salas, Councilor Lutterman. This amount here is to design the project, complete design, yes.
But it's not, no,
Not-
it's
not
not
to
to
build
finish
it.
it.
Not to
This is
build
just
it.
to design it so you can look at it.
Yes, I think,
Put it on paper.
yes, for the design.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow. To be honest, that's cheap. Or I think
I
it's
thought,
cheap.
let's just
We
go
go.
about our business with the regular Y and, oh, my gosh.
So,
That's awful.
Well, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, that said, I move to approve task order RFP 2024-003PBH03 for US 70 New Mexico 48 intersection design with Bohannon Houston and Inc. for a total of project cost of $1,699,964.32, including New Mexico GRT.
Second.
We got a motion and second?
I do have one question for Ron.
Yes.
On the drainage portion of it there, that they're saying that they're going to use the studies coming down from the village and also the county, but the BHI is not including time to develop hydrology models to replicate the burn scar as far as, that's where all the water's coming is from, up in that area. So where's the information coming from?
Mayor Pro Tem Salas, Councilor Eby, that they'll be using some of the data from, with Cobb Finley. Also, we're going to work with the Department of Transportation. We're trying to get some designs in place with the drainage structures, so we'll work. It's going to be I would say it's going to be about an 18-month project, and we're going to have to really coordinate between the village and the Department of Transportation in order to get this project completed.
So who's going to be doing those studies up there on the reservation?
On the reservation, I'm not sure who's doing the studies up in the reservation. That I
Water
don't.
won't come through
Yeah.
that part, will it?
You know, it comes out of Bear Canyon and all the way down 70. And
Well, I know, but that's the Y, that it's not getting flooded.
So maybe this might help clear up a little bit. As part of the watershed-based plan, which was awarded pre-fire, it's also one of the task orders, Cobb Finley, it was their first task order we awarded to them. We have to have partnerships with Mescalero and Ruidoso Downs. So we will be talking to them about, that's a requirement of the watershed-based plan, is you have to have an all-encompassing, all the partners involved. So they'll start collecting data from them as well and see how we can best work with all of our neighbors.
Yes, because it would seem like you'd need that information.
And Mayor Pro Tem Salas, Councilor Eby, when we begin the project, when we issue the notice of award, notice to proceed, we'll have that conversation, and we'll have Bohannon Houston, we can also have them present, because that is going to be a huge project. And there's a lot of questions that will be asked, and that's a great question, so.
Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
For Ron, sharing Councilor Lutterman's alarm at the cost, where's this money actually coming from?
The Mayor Pro Tem Salas, Councilor Corey, We received an EDA grant that's going to pay, I believe it's 80% of it, and then we also received from the Department of Finance Administration our matching portion of it, the 20%, so we have all the money in hand. It won't cost the village anything.
But after that, do we have to go out for another grant?
Mayor Pro Tem Salas, Councilor Lutterman, for the construction phase of it, yes, it'll have to be grant funding in order to apply for, but we'll also work with the state since that's a federal highway and the state highway. We'll work, there's funding that the District 2 are able to apply for within the state of New Mexico and the Federal Highway Administration, so we'll work together on that, trying to get the funding. And I can't remember what that, when we did the feasibility study on that, Mayor Pro Tem Salas, was it about 12 to 16 million, I think, to do that whole project, somewhere in that area,
I
so.
don't recall, I know it was more than 10, but.
Oh, yeah, so we'll be, as the project's going on, we'll be applying for funding and working on that, so. Because it's not our infrastructure, and that's what we're saying to the state, it's their infrastructure, but we're doing the design work, and we've been working on this now for 4 to 5 years, so.
Yeah, because they wanted to do a rotary or a roundabout. Yeah. Do you remember that
Oh, yeah,
discussion?
I remember.
With pony rides in the center.
So,
Well, with
so will
semis.
we have to get the total amount to be able to start the project? I mean, so this is $1,700,000 just to lay it out. And then, so is it going to be another 5 or 10 years before we get the money?
Hope not.
To me, this is just such a waste.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas, Councilor Lutterman, are you saying for the design or for the construction part?
The construction.
We're already working on trying to get construction funds, working with the District 2. We just need to lobby for that and have that as one of the priority projects. Everyone is on board and really backing us on it, and we'll have it ready. We hope we can get it into the STIP program and be able to get it funded.
But the only reason I ask is because we have been working on this for a long time. And so we're just now getting the money for,
It took a year and a half to get the grant funding, but we were also fortunate to receive the matching funds for it also.
Right.
So it won't be,
And thank you for addressing the landscaping, because reading the scope of work, they weren't including any landscaping for the project. So they'll add that in later, or we'll get another grant for that. Any other questions for Mr. Sena? I'll entertain the motion.
We already did.
Oh, we did, then let's take a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Jackson?
Aye.
Counselor Eby?
Aye.
Counselor Corey?
Aye.
Counselor Hooker?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas?
Aye.
Counselor Letterman?
under duress, yes.
You could say no.
Well, no, it
You
doesn't
could
do
say
any
no.
good. It's just,
Change your vote to no. No, don't do that.
yes,
You want to change?
no.
Item number 5, discussion and possible action on Resolution 2024-44, a resolution amending the Village of Ruidoso Personnel Policy with the addition of Chapter 18, Section 1-5, Emergency Operations.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. This resolution, Eric, the emergency manager, and I, Eric Quiller, worked on this together, would add in a Chapter 18 to our personnel policy, clearly defining emergency operations for all of our staff. I'll quickly run through the sections. 18-1 is our emergency operations and response. And again, just to define what the village's expectations is, what the community's expectations are. When we're in an emergency or a disaster event, the community's relying on us, they're turning to us. And so we do need our staff, all hands on deck to work through those issues. 18-2, groups, employees in different assignments for the duration of the emergency. For example, Group A would include fire, police, public works, Group B would include other specialized emergency personnel, including the airport, and any employees with emergency plan annex responsibilities. Group C would be the labor pool, and as we saw in this last event, it really does take several employees to work through all of these groups. There's so many different jobs that are required to run the EOC and beyond. 18-3 will talk about hours worked and leave requests during this time. 18-4 talks about our training requirements under the NIMS system. 18-5 will talk about emergency contact information for employees, and that during an emergency, we need to be able to contact them. And if they haven't heard from their supervisor, HR, or or an emergency coordinator, then they need to contact their supervisor. This is a much-needed chapter in the policy, as we just came off of this emergency and encountered some of these issues that we want to clean up. We want to train our staff on and make sure that everyone is clear.
Mayor, question
Yes,
for
sir.
Cheryl. I think I'd heard we kind of copied this from other communities.
Mayor Pro Tem, Counselor Corey, Mr. Queller said that he borrowed the group assignments from Sugar Land, Texas.
Okay.
It was a grouping of employees that worked for them. It does look like it's going to work for us as well.
Okay. Thank you, Cheryl.
Yes.
I'm surprised we didn't have the emergency contact information, because I remember when hiring employees, there was a card separate from the, interview process and everything. Once the hiring was done, then put all your emergency contact, and not just, the wife or what, there was at least 2 names that you could put down, so.
Mayor Pro Tem, we still follow that process.
Okay.
It's just a matter of getting employees to update their information as they change phone numbers or move or whatnot, so.
Just like it says there, it's the employee's responsibility to update that. I mean,
It is.
you're not gonna babysit, or I'm not gonna allow you to babysit them to, keep that up, so, okay. Anyway, entertain a motion.
I move that we accept Resolution 2024-44, a resolution amending the Village of Ruidoso Personnel Policy with the addition of Chapter 18, Sections 1 through 5, Emergency Operations.
Second.
Got a second? Roll call vote, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Cheryl.
Counselor Letterman?
Aye.
Counselor Jackson?
Aye.
Counselor Corey?
Aye.
Counselor Hooker?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas?
Aye.
Counselor Eby?
Aye.
Item number 6, discussion and possible action on purchase and installation of 9 emergency sirens from Federal Signal Corporation Alerting and Notification System in the amount of $410,785.02, including New Mexico gross receipt tax.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas and Council, I'm going to have the 2 chiefs present this item, and then I'll fill in on the funding for it, so.
Mayor Pro Tem Council, basically, we're going to be discussing the repairing and improving our current siren system.
Move that mic closer to
You
you.
hear me a little better?
Move it closer, you don't have to reach over, but.
So we're repairing and improving our existing siren system. Some of the sirens that got taken out with the fire and flood, and some are just old and not working anymore. So we had, I believe it was a total of 9 that we're putting in, 3 voice activated. So those are, we're talking about putting those, 1 in Winter Park, 1 possibly at RPD or White Mountain Sports Complex, and the other one at the Wingfield Park. And then the other 6, 1 in the Upper Canyon to replace one was before World War II. Pikes Peak, it was taken out with the fire. Wax Pine, it was taken out by the fire. Station 1, because it's village property, and we have 2 really old sirens that we're constantly putting money into. Hole Road in Gavilan, because nothing exists toward the north. And then they call it Hell Hole off of highway, it's gonna notify everybody on the backside of Highway 70.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Where are we going to get the money?
Mayor Pro Tem Salas, members of the council, we had a grant, some grant funding available, so I reached out to the DFA and they approved this project. So I'll be paid 100% by the grant funding.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Counselor Hooker,
Aye.
Counselor Jackson,
Aye.
Counselor Corey,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas,
Aye.
Counselor Letterman,
Aye.
Counselor Eby.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Item number 7, discussion and possible action on task order RFP 2025-002P01 for professional services for disaster recovery coordinator with DW Dukes LLC in the amount of $1,817,550, including New Mexico gross receipt tax.
Judy, you want to join us on this one also?
So we have money?
Yeah, I like that look, Judy.
It was a smile, I think.
Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, we did advertise for an RFP for this. We believe we had
I believe it's 3.
three that submitted. We had been working with Dennis Dukes. He was ranked and rated the highest. And I'll have Judy talk about the funding, how we're doing that, and then Adam too for any work that he's going to be performing.
No, you can have it.
So this task order would take the process of identifying all our projects within the South Forks disaster, pricing them, getting them through FEMA into a project worksheet. That would then obligate funds. So Mr. Dukes has been dealing with FEMA for a while, and he's come pretty far as identifying all our projects. So this would be a part of the management cost that could be attributed to the overall project applications or obligations of all our identified projects within the village. So this would be eligible cost. But for right now, since we're not anywhere close to getting any funding within the next, couple of months, this money will have to be offset by the money that is part of the loan with Department of Finance and Administration. So they will be loaning some funds to get started and get this process moving until we can get to a point where funds are obligated and we either get 50% of the federal or the state, or we just start sending in invoices and cancel checks. So depending on which way FEMA wants us to move forward concerning the state part too, is we'll just have to determine that.
So this is only for, this is for him?
That's just him.
He's got, I think, 6 to 8 people working under him, another engineer. There are different specialties for the actual firm, yes.
Oh my gosh.
So when you think about it, we wouldn't have the people that we could allocate just to work on this for 40 hours per week. And when you're talking about $150, $190 an hour, and you want somebody that knows what they're talking about, can speak the FEMA language, can tell me that water doesn't flow uphill, and has a little stamp that says he knows that water doesn't flow uphill,
Right.
It probably pays to have that guy on your staff.
In Mayor Pro Tem Salas, members of the council, this was a task order he put in there. We'll be working with him, and this is not to exceed, so he may not even reach that in a year, but that's where he's at right now. There's different items where he'll be working with us, and we'll either have him work on that or not have him work on that also.
Right.
And he's already started under the old contract with the county, identifying, all the bridges and everything else, so he's familiar with what we're going through.
I appreciate his work, and there's no doubt about it. It's just unbelievable,
Well,
Yes.
the price.
way up there.
You better start baking your muffins. So you got a bake sale.
I do know what goes downhill, but I wasn't sure about.
So,
And boy, do we know about that.
and, sorry, I apologize, Mayor Pro Temp and Council, I apologize, I was outside. Just a quick aside, if it's more, and I know it's a big number, but I think if you look at it in comparison to what we're requesting, the cost that we're submitting and knowing the ins and outs of FEMA versus the request of possibly 450 to 500 million in infrastructure requests, those kinds of things, and making sure they get approved. Again, that number probably won't be reached, but those are the professional understandings that we need to kind of move it up. Like Judy said, we need someone to speak FEMA speak and get us up to that next level, so.
It's just so sad to have all that money and not that it's going to waste. I'm not saying that. It's just we're spending that money to say, okay, we need to do this. We're not using it for the projects. It's just mind-boggling.
It's more of the tracking piece of it in the reimbursements of it. So, I mean, if Mike and I went and tracked something, if we forgot just one little piece, we get that reimbursement. So basically, it falls back on the contractor that we're hiring to actually help us out and make sure we dot our i's and cross our t's.
I understand it. Thank goodness we've got the 22 million.
Just as a reminder, a portion of those costs are reimbursed as administrative costs under the FEMA requirements. So his billing will be submitted for reimbursement as well.
Oh, just a question. I haven't heard the name High Water Mark during all of these discussions there. Whatever happened to?
So Mayor Pro Temp and Council, we have had engagements with Phoebe through High Water Mark. She has been partnered with another entity that, at least as of right now, that we know of, that had been doing some work, but they didn't submit for any of that work or related to this item. I think they're probably working on the other disaster up north, so.
Any other questions for staff?
No.
No, I'll entertain a motion.
Proceeding with the Platinum Parachute, I move to approve task order RFP 2025-P-1 for professional services for disaster recovery coordinator with VW Dukes LLC in the amount of $1,817,550, including New Mexico GRT.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Counselor Jackson,
Aye.
Counselor Corey,
Aye.
Counselor Hooker,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas,
Aye.
Counselor Letterman,
Aye.
Counselor Eby.
All right.
Motion passed. Item number 8, thank you all very
Yeah,
much.
thank you very much.
Discussion and possible action on final change order number 4 with Mesa Verde for the Lynx Trail project, resulting in a decrease of $106,896.54, including New Mexico gross receipt tax.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and Council.
Afternoon.
So this will be the final change order for the Lynx Trail project. It is a savings of 106,000, almost 107,000.
Nice.
And we see a lot of that coming from things as like environmental commitment, because is a savings of just over 12,000. We were able to do it in a time of the year where we didn't have to do environmental studies. So certain times of the year you have to do environmental studies for things like the certain owls or certain birds or things like that. Because of the time of year we were able to do it, we could avoid those studies. So we did save 12,000 there. Another large savings, it's actually two places on here, it's almost 75,000 or just over 75,000, is the subgrade, then the unstable subgrade stabilization. So what we were able to do with this project, instead of coming in, tearing out the whole trail and removing all that material, bringing new material in, packing it in, things like that, we actually ground up the old trail and used it for the sub-base and the sub-base material. So that was a savings of about 75,000. Some of the other big ones is the Class A seeding. So part of this contract was new grass seed along the edges of the trail. However, due to the fire actually helped us out here, they did the trail, then before we could do all the closeout process, there was enough time that the grass had actually spread back to the trail. So we saved about $20,000 in seeding costs because the grass had just naturally grown back to the trail without having to seed it.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
question, can we use this money to finish it?
So unfortunately, we cannot. This money, this money will
Honestly, I
revert
was
back.
disappointed. The worst part of the whole walking trail, we didn't do anything.
Yeah, this money reverts back, but I am working on writing grants for that last portion. I already have the cost estimates for it, and so we're gonna work. I know TLPA, which is the type of funding that we used for this, is opening back up here in the next month or two, and so we'll be writing to finalize that grant, or to finalize that trail system.
I'll make a motion.
Do it.
I'll make a motion to approve final change order number 4 with Mesa Verde for the Links Trail project, resulting in a decrease of $106,896.54, including NMGRT.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Counselor Hooker,
Aye.
Counselor Jackson,
Aye.
Counselor Corey,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas,
Aye.
Counselor Letterman,
Aye.
Counselor Eby.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Matthew, apologies, I didn't mean to slight Parks and Rec for their work in Midtown
It's
during the
perfectly
snowstorm.
fine.
That was an incredible device that goes down and
Yeah, it's
sweeps.
pretty sharp.
I can remember when the sidewalks were so narrow, you could never get such a device on the sidewalk.
Those are our Ventrax, and they're very, very handy machines. We have a ton of attachments for them. They have the room, as you saw, they have snow blowers, we have plows for them, we have mowers for them. There's reach arm mower, boom mowers, there's all kinds of attachments that we have for them, and we're very, very thankful for council for getting those, helping us get that equipment, because it has made a huge difference in our workload.
It sure made a difference for Midtown and those merchants too.
Those guys fight. We have 2 of them, and they fight to be the first 2 to the yard on a snow day, because they're heated cabs, heated seats.
Oh, I know, I could just see, I thought they probably had headphones on, I don't know, but.
They fight to get to those first before the show.
Thank you, Counselor. Item number 9, discussion and possible action on final change order number 5 with Mesa Verde for the Moon Mountain Trail project, resulting in a decrease of $580.54, including New Mexico gross receipt tax.
So this one's not quite as great of a refund, or savings, but it is a savings, and this one was found in base course. They didn't have to use as much base course on the trail as we expected, so that's where the savings came in on this one. And this is for Moon Mountain.
Mayor,
Trail.
I move approval of final change order number 5 with Mesa Verde for the Moon Mountain Trail project, resulting in a decrease of $580.54, including New Mexico gross receipts tax.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Counselor Corey,
Aye.
Counselor Letterman,
Aye.
Counselor Jackson,
Aye.
Counselor Hooker,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas,
Aye.
Counselor Eby.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you very much,
Thank
Matthew.
y'all.
Item number 10, discussion and possible action on host venue agreement with Ironman 70.3 in the amount of $300,000 to host the Ironman 70.3 New Mexico Ruidoso race event in 2056, and there was a misprint. It should be 21, 21, 26.
Are we
No,
looking way ahead? I don't know.
it was 2025 to 2026 and 2027.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. The actual dates are for 2026 through 2028. We had, on last Thursday, we actually had Ironman reach out to us and make a decision that they want to be able to have as much time possible to promote the event through all their channels of media. So being that if they're doing the event in July of 2025, they'd only have 8 months or so to really promote the event. So this will give us time to also budget accordingly and more time to really, promote and produce the event. This host venue agreement for Ironman 70.3 is something we've been working on for over a year. I started working on it the very first day I got here. And so my first conversation with Judy Stowers, Regional Director of Ironman, was 3 days after I started. We have gone through a lengthy process where we actually had gone through a bid process where we had about 10 different destinations actually competing against us to get this opportunity. We went down to the down to the last draw, where it was between 3 destinations, and we won that award through Ironman to be the host destination for this region for Ironman. So this 3-year agreement with them would be something that they would produce. It would be their event, and they would manage it. We'd be the host venue, just as if we are a convention center providing a venue, the Village would be our venue. And this event is something that has been going on for over 40 years. It's one of the most respected outdoor triathlons in the world. And bringing it here would be a significant impact economically and also through media.
Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Question, Eddie, this will be paid out of lodger's tax?
I'll let Mike take it from here.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas, Councilmember Corey, initially, yes, the idea was that this, as well as other events such as these, will be paid out of lodger's tax. Because of the hit that we've taken, we are still looking to possibly budget as a placeholder. However, moving forward, the state has designated roughly $10 million for business advancement through SB1. Those discussions are still actively taking place, but the village is requesting roughly 1.3 million for events for the next 3 years that would occur based on costs that we believe are going to be needed. So we would fund some of the local events through our lodger's tax, with it currently growing at the rate it's growing, and knowing that it took that hit in these larger events, we would try and have funded through the state. There hasn't been a specific commitment of a solid yes. We do have in writing that they are actively looking at moving that 1.2 million to another entity such as tourism or economic development for these activities, but we are still working through that process. So as a placeholder and possibly finalization, yes, it would come from lodger's tax. However, the idea is that we fund it from SB1 funds that were specifically assigned for these reasons.
But approving this today doesn't necessarily.
Approving the contract today
Doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to impact general fund. Is that?
That is a correct statement. So worst case scenario, yes, approving this today, this could impact general fund at the end of the day. However, the idea is that it would not. It does commit the village to 100,000 annually.
And on that, I do want to remind the council that in the last year or so, Parks and Rec, as well as our special events group with Eddie and stuff, we've worked hard to really slash our requests from lodger's tax. We went from requesting near $1 million a year between overtime and bringing in big events and things like that to our cost to now our request for lodger's tax is about 160,000, 150,000. And so from Parks and Rec and special events. And so we're, as staff, we're actively, and we're still putting on great caliber of events, I hope everybody has seen. And so we're working actively as a staff to make sure our budgets are in place to keep these things.
And forgive my skepticism, but we're getting some pretty dire financial indicators. I've heard earlier, start of the meeting, talk about building a new disc golf course. If our general fund's getting hit, that's worrisome.
And things like the disc golf course or grant, and as well as an event like an Ironman, could bring up to approximately $12 million in revenue to the village. Not the village itself, but in tax revenue is their economic impact. And so, it's one of those, it costs a little bit to bring a lot, and that's really what we're wanting to we're looking at.
And Mayor Pro Tem Salas and Councilmember Corey, no, to your point, the general fund is definitely taking a hit. One of the concerns I think that we all have, as Judy's mentioned, is where we're going. We have seen an uptick by month of what we're looking at, but we're still significantly down. I think one of the things that we're looking at and that's still outstanding are these FEMA loans up to $5 million. What we're looking at to buy back, or what we're looking at to build back. I think, and I know there's skepticism across the board in the events that we're trying to bring in. Ironman is estimated at $16 million impact annually.
No, I'm not questioning that. And pre-June, I'd be all on board, but our world has changed. And with due respect, a couple of months ago, I mean, we turned down vehicles. You know, these two items.
So our concern.
1.3 million.
No, I agree. Our recommendation, and that's over the course of the next 3 years. But our recommendation is based on the idea, you had a business owner today that said, we're hoping to have a strong winter season, a strong spring season, a strong summer season. The only way that we have those strong seasons is by bringing people back into the village. The position that was given to this team a year and a half ago was basically, how do we bring more foot traffic and quality foot traffic into the village? And so we understand that there's a concern about revenues. What I will say is that since June, we've also got 44 million that has been qualified to us in applications through the state on what we're doing. We know that we have $10 million that's been assigned for business development.
Mike, that's apples and oranges.
Well, the $10 million
That
is
money's
actually,
not gonna pay for
the $10 million will. That's SB 1. And we advocated for that strongly as the village. And so those items are actually ready to be tapped into. It's a matter of making sure that people know how to tap into it. And so we're actively working with the state to tap into that $10 million. We do have a commitment from a deputy secretary and a secretary to actively move those funds to fund these projects. We also have in writing a commitment from those same two secretaries to figure out, if that doesn't work, what's another way to alleviate the impact to the village to be able to host these events. And some of that is through current funds and sponsorships, because these are not only this event, but an event that we're going to discuss in the immediate future, are going to be the first ever in New Mexico history. And so the state is starting to take an advanced approach to how can they assist as well. And I want to make sure that that's made aware of. It's not just us as the village that's on the hook, but we are requesting that assistance from the state. But I 100% understand the concern.
What's the timing? Is there any way we can kick this can down the road a month or two?
This is our opportunity right now.
Well, so just to clarify, the funding structure is actually changed. 50,000 is no longer required in January. It won't be required until the following year. So that $100,000 goes away for the year. So really, this has been kicked down the road. This can has been kicked down the road, and we won't see those costs for another year and a couple of months. So possibly 14 months down the road when we see our first initial commitment from Ironman.
So we won't owe the 50,000 July 4th to 2025?
No, till
Got it.
26.
Got it.
It will be, the very first payment we'll be looking at for Ironman will be January 15th of 2026 for 50,000.
Yeah.
And then the remaining payment would be 50,000 due on or before June 15th of 2026.
So, Eddie, question, just going down to the next item, that's the same with Xterra, right? They're both commitment payments in 2026.
That is correct.
Make a motion.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the host venue agreement with Ironman 70.3 in the amount of $300,000 to host the Ironman 70.3 New Mexico Ruidoso Race event in 2025, 2026, and 2027.
26, 27, 28.
Oh, okay. See, my
So,
computer
I mean, yeah.
locked up. As written, as
Second.
stated.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Counselor Hooker?
Aye.
Counselor Salas?
Aye.
Counselor Corey?
No.
Counselor Jackson,
Aye.
Counselor Letterman,
Aye.
and Counselor Eby.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Item number 11, discussion and possible action on memorandum of understanding with Exteria Global LLC for hosting 2026, 2027, and 2028 Exteria World Championship events in the amount of $1,080,000.
The Xterra World Championships is the premier outdoor recreation event for mountain biking and trail running. We actually have Xterra coming in for 2025, which we're doing the baseline event, which is a silver event, and we're spending $60,000 for that event for 2025. That's going to be August 15th through the 17th. This happened just about a month ago. We had the opportunity pop up to us where the World Championship this year is being held in Italy. For 2026 is going to be held in Hong Kong. There was issues with China, and China pulled out of the agreement, giving it an opening to where we could host the World Championship event for Xterra. This event is the #1 event in the world for mountain biking and trail running. It's a 3-year commitment. It would be $360,000 per year. But what comes with that is televised broadcasting, media everywhere, magazines, print, social media, everything, plus the ability to have about 8,000 people from all around the world here for about a week or two. So this is like a $23 million economic impact to the village, and it will change the village to become a premier destination for outdoor recreation with this event. It's the biggest one there is.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, sir.
So you saw the letter that was produced by Mr. Porras as far as some of his concerns and issues?
I did, and I actually called him this morning and had a great conversation with him and addressed every one of his issues, and he said there was no need for him to show up today.
Is there a potential for infrastructure expenses on top of this? Do we have to spend money to?
We're acting as a venue again. This is a all fully produced and managed event by Xterra. They bring in their semi-trucks with all of their gear, production. We will have stuff that will come from Parks and Recs as far as fencing, cones, different things like that, which Matt has been very involved with in the discussions and going through everything on that. This event is scheduled to be in Greece in 2029, and Greece will have it for 3 years. If we pass on this, then we won't have it for quite a long time. May never get it. Go ahead.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas and Councilmember Corey, the answer is yes. So for events like this, there are state programs that require submission on infrastructure. We are actively engaged in those as we speak, both for Ironman and this event. And so we'll look at everything from trail enhancements to any type of road components that we can look at that are built into these to be upgraded.
So the answer is there is the potential for additional costs.
A potential cost?
That we're going to be paying more is what he's asking.
No. So those improvements, so they've already come look at our facilities. They're happy with our trail system currently. They're happy with the streets, everything as is. There will not be infrastructure, like we won't have to build anything for them to come.
And Eddie, I applaud everything you're doing, and so please don't take this personally.
Councilmember Corey, I understand. We've gone through a lot this last year. I get
We're
it.
hearing about people that have lost their homes, that, I just, to me, it's an issue of priorities. And honestly, I question whether Ruidoso is big enough as a financial entity to support something of this magnitude.
If the leaders of the world's largest triathlons have come here and made a decision that we are the destination for the World Championships, they've put a lot of thought and effort into it.
Yeah, but I'm speaking financially.
I understand.
I'll make a comment, then I'd like to make a motion. I know, I applaud you, Eddie, for doing all this work and everything in this, but the way I look at this is that it's just like the Forest Service seeding the mountain. They're essentially putting a recovery onto that mountain and having vegetation, grass grow, and they have to seed. So essentially what we're doing with this is seeding the economy in the way that it is. And to me, it's like people say, well, we're waiting to have a kid till it's the perfect time. When is the perfect time to have a child? I think that you've got to, as far as, I see this as a great way to stimulate the economy, to bring it in. When you're looking at 100,000 or 300,000 to potentially bring in millions of dollars, and you look at that peanuts, and you're looking at a year down the road. Possibly there could be some funding coming from the New Mexico Tourism Department.
That's correct.
Be looking at other avenues of funding and grants. So I'm all for it. I believe that, you just got to jump into it. And I believe this is, I think the water's going to be warm on this, and it's going to be good. So with that, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes, please do.
I'd like to approve memorandum of understanding with Xterra Global LLC for hosting 2026, 2027, and 2028 Xterra World Championship events in the amount of $1,080,000.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
Counselor Eby?
Aye.
Counselor Hooker?
Aye.
Counselor Letterman?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas?
Aye.
Counselor Jackson?
Aye.
Counselor Corey?
No.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I move that we move into closed session for discussion of limited personnel matters, citing 1015-1H2 NMSA 1978. Further discussion subject to the attorney-client privilege pertaining to threatened or pending litigation in which the Village of Ruidoso is or may become a participant, citing 1015-1H7 NMSA 1978. And finally, discussion of the purchase, acquisition, and/or disposal of real property and/or water rights by the Village of Ruidoso regarding the Links Golf Course, citing 1015-1H8 NMSA 1978. Further, any action taken as a result of the closed session will be brought back into open session, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Counselor Jackson? Counselor Hooker?
Aye.
Counselor Corey?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Salas?
Aye.
Counselor Letterman?
Aye.
Counselor Eby?
Well, we'll move back to the conference room.